Hello, welcome. We're just getting the room set up here. I'm going to pin a link and I'll be talking about boundaries. Oh, everyone jumped in at once. Good to see everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm feeling a little rushed to get into the room. So just give me a second here to pin a link. Just a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, I have the link up here. I worked really hard on this checklist and I was having issues with my email delivery system up until the last minute. So hopefully it'll work for everyone. But I wanted to talk today about boundaries in kind of a unique way and how we need to think about our calendar and our schedule. So from a very logistical, practical, time and energy standpoint, how to think about our calendar as a highly sensitive person. Obviously, most of us know that we need a lot more rest, downtime, quality sleep, and our schedule is something that can take away from that effort to get that quality time, that alone time, processing time in our calendar. And if you've been in any of these rooms before, you've definitely heard me talk about Elaine Aron's rest guidelines, which is something that I suggest that every highly sensitive person find time to add into their calendar, but it can be one of those slow integration processes because it is difficult, again, in our culture and society to slow down and allow for more space in our calendar. And also, as a highly sensitive person, I think we feel a lot of pressure to keep up, or we may have a lot of interests that we're into. And so we're excited about a lot of things, but we're really not realistic about how much we can really take on and how we can balance that with our highly sensitive nervous system. So I just wanted to share today a link at the top of the page. It does say Flow Desk, which is just my email subscription provider. But when you click on it, it'll ask for your name and your email address. And then I have a 5-page form that will be a checklist and information about that checklist and how to use the checklist that can help you just put in different dates. Some of them are static and fixed, and then others are going to be dependent on your personal setup, whether you have family, partner, kids in school, and how you kind of set up your calendar based on those different parameters. So if you want to click on that link, that will lead you to the checklist. It seems to be lagging quite a bit, so you'll have to confirm your email address, check your spam and promotions tab. And then once you confirm your email, it might take up to 10 minutes before you see the checklist. So I just wanted to give you the heads up on that. But I wanted to talk about some of the items on the checklist and how we can think about our overall 2022 calendar. This is something that I had created for 2021, and I just didn't get on top of 2022 to make it the same way that I had for the calendar year of 2021. But I did just update it and created an additional bonus checklist. So that's something that was not on the original calendar checklist that I had created in 2021. So I might just start with, if anyone is interested in coming up on stage here, I'm curious to hear how you keep track of your events, your appointments, the things that you want to add into your calendar, and also if you have a preference to digital calendar versus paper, or if you use a combination of both. I definitely need a combination of both. And I also need to be able to see a bird's eye view of the whole year as I'm thinking about planning in time off or vacations or just how my whole year looks on one page. And then if I have to shuffle things around, it's just an easy view. So I also look at everything week by week, month by month. So I do use digital calendars. I prefer the iCal versus the Google Calendar. So I'd love to hear if you have a preference or if you are adamant about one of those over the other. I know Google is really good to be helpful if you have other people in your family that use Google Calendar because you can sync up your calendars. I just find being on the iPhone, I like to be as minimal as I can and not overwhelm my visual path when I'm looking at a calendar. And I find the Google Calendar feels a little overwhelming to me as you start to chunk and block different parts of your day and time. So with that being said, if anyone would like to come up on stage, you can just click on the little hand at the bottom there, and you can come up on stage and share your thoughts on your calendar system, your schedule system, anything that has been really helpful for you, or if you hate a certain way because it's just too overstimulating as an HSP, I'm happy to hear about that as well. But if not, I will go ahead and just kind of give you a few of the concepts off of this form that I created. So let me know if any of this resonates with you. So being a highly sensitive person, I'll just kind of read a little bit here off my form. As an HSP myself, I know that our time and energy are our most valuable resources. So I go from the approach of being preventative versus reactive. And in that preventative process, I think just a little bit of planning and plotting on your calendar is really essential because it'll just give space and time to certain things that will energetically potentially knock us over. And so if we're conscious and mindful of those particular events and dates, we can plan ahead. We can plan some padding time before the event or after the event. But these are really key to just us not having to be on a up and down roller coaster as HSPs, but really trying to balance our energy and give space and time to the things that are important to us, but also putting in those pockets of space and time that allow us to recover or recuperate or transition to a different activity, and also thinking about travel time and how sometimes we don't think about how long it might take us to get from point A to point B, and then we don't put that in our calendar and how that can set us, take us off track from our calendar or original intention. So I specifically started with a bunch of fixed dates. And if anyone is in, let's see, I know there are a few states that don't participate. So I think most of the US participates in the time change. So if you're from the US, you may have just had this last weekend a time change. And that time change, even when we prepare for it, can really knock us out. So I know that my sleep has been affected by springing forward, so changing the clocks an hour ahead. And over the years, from past experience, just learning that no matter how I prepare for that, I tend to just, my sleep is off. I'm extra tired. It's really different to see more light at the end of the day, which can kind of confuse my system. I know there are a lot of different ways to get our circadian rhythm back on track. And one of the things that I have been doing intentionally is making sure that I get outside first thing in the morning and get some sun on my face if the sun is out. And I know that that can be helpful in resetting your circadian rhythm and also setting yourself up for a really great day because you're getting fresh air, you're getting that perspective of thinking about your day and allowing time to just be before you rush into any job, work, or taking care of other people. So I really have found that to be really helpful. And luckily in Iowa, the weather has been so wonderful this week. And I've really been enjoying outside time because we've had really extreme winter temperatures. And in the spring, we can have snow one day and 70 degrees the next. So you really just don't know what you're going to get. But this week has just been wonderful. We hit almost 70 degrees yesterday, and that is just so refreshing. It's really nice to get outside. So some of the things that I have on my list that are just fixed dates that you can add to your calendar, that as highly sensitive people, I think we're more susceptible to a lot of universal shifts and changes. For instance, for women, we definitely are impacted by the moon cycle. You know, we're made of water. The water changes with the moon, the tide changes. And so this is just something to note because I know from also taking care of kids my whole life that kids tend to be also very sensitive to the full moon energy. And so this is just something that I've noted. And in the calendar checklist that I provided up on the top, I have noted all of the 2022 dates. So you don't have to look it up throughout the whole year. I've just have them listed. And the other thing that I have is Mercury retrogrades. And if you're not familiar with Mercury retrograde, you can come up on stage and I can definitely answer any questions about that. But it's something that controls communication, technology, what else? And travel. So if you're plotting a vacation, you want to be mindful of Mercury retrograde dates, because anytime I've ever bought a plane ticket during those dates, I seem to have travel catastrophes. And so I've just gotten really conscious about not planning or purchasing something during that time. And also, you're not supposed to sign contracts, so it's not a good time to sign that lease on the new place that you're going to rent or purchase a new home or start a new contract. So there's little details about Mercury retrograde that will, when you have it in your calendar, you can kind of think about some different decisions that might be helpful or not helpful during that time. The other thing I have listed are the equinoxes and solstices. And I find that those are also just another reminder that the season is changing. And when you're approaching your life from a holistic perspective, which is, I'm a certified holistic wellness coach. So I always keep nature in mind, and I keep the cycles of nature in mind when I am also thinking about my calendar. And there's different celebrations. A lot of people will celebrate those different dates. So I just wanted to include those. And then I have the time changes, of course. And then I also have a resource. This is a book, if you want to call it a book or a diary. It's kind of like a journal that you can write in. But I created a link to this particular diary that I got for 2022, and I find it extremely helpful. And I've never been one to really pay attention to all the different kinds of moon phases, but this book really helps you think about the different phases and gives you practical suggestions on how you can utilize the energy of these different phases. They all mean something different. And so I list a book that's really helpful for that. And then also, of course, I touch on Elaine Aron's rest guidelines. And the rest guidelines are something that I have pulled from her, the Highly Sensitive Person's workbook. And I note the page and how to find that in her workbook. And I've talked about these a lot. And I think when HSPs first learn they're an HSP, and you present this list, it can be very overwhelming. And so, again, these are things to target and aim for. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to, hit these every single day or every single week. But as a highly sensitive person, you really want to aim for this because it is how we can care for our highly sensitive nervous system. We need to allow for more rest, more downtime, more processing time, and to at least clear one day off of our week where we don't have errands or we're working from home. I call it the no obligation day. And so that way you don't feel rushed to leave the house. You don't have to be on anyone else's schedule time wise. And you can really just tap into your energetic flow for that day. And that doesn't mean you don't do anything or you're not productive, but you're just kind of tapping into your inner guidance system and seeing what is coming to you, what is pulling at you, what's tugging at you, and then following that nudge instead of an external time system. And if just to complete that list, the other thing she highly recommends is taking 1 month off per year. And then she says to preferably spread that out. So if you think about taking 1 week off per quarter, that would give you time to recalibrate, reset yourself. And her huge recommendation on that is to prioritize sleep. So if you're taking a vacation, make sure that vacation isn't something that you're jamming a lot of different things into it, but rather you're prioritizing sleep and you're getting as much sleep as your body wants during that 1 week off. So that's kind of just the rundown of the fixed dates in the checklist. And I know not everyone in here is female. Oops. But one of the things that I have learned over the last decade plus of tracking my menstrual cycle is that I definitely have different energy capacity during different phases of my cycle. And so that is something, if you're not already doing, I do have a link to an app that's really helpful for that. And if you have already been tracking, one other thing that I highly recommend is a book called The Woman Code. And I do have this book listed as well and a link in my handout. And this book is transformational. Women aren't supposed to have PMS. Like, that is not a normal thing. It's an indication that our hormones are off. And so she does have some great recommendations of how to treat each phase, the 4 phases of our menstrual cycle, and what we should be thinking about energetically, and also like what we should be eating or how we should be thinking about that phase and how to utilize and leverage that phase the best that we can. And I would love to hear if anyone else is tracking theirs and notices different energy slumps or highs or, whatever your experience is. I would love to hear that. Birthdays and anniversaries are another thing that is really tough for me personally to get ahead of. So I want to make sure that I have that marked in my calendar and then even create reminders 1 week, 1 month in advance so that if I'm getting a gift or I'm creating an event or I want to get together with that person, I have enough notice to get that into my calendar. Vacations, trips, and time off, even if you're just doing a staycation, that is something that you want to put in your calendar and appropriately plan for, that you give yourself some buffer time beforehand and after time to recuperate. I never schedule any work the day before I take a trip, because I need that day to just sort myself out, to feel grounded about leaving, take care of anything last minute, but really just give that day as a day of preparation to being out of town. And then when I do come back from trips, I always make sure that I do not have those couple days after my trip. I have had incidences where I've either a flight has been canceled, so then I'm delayed by a day. So I just keep my work schedule really light the following days after a vacation, just because you expect the unexpected. And then holidays are one of those things that is really unique for everyone. We all have different holidays that we observe, not just the traditional, conventional holidays. And so to be thinking ahead about the holidays that you celebrate, and that there are different tasks that are required of you to prepare for those holidays. Again, it's just getting ahead of those events so that you're not overwhelmed and doing things last minute. And then also giving yourself time before and after to recuperate and prepare. And if anyone is with school age kids right now, you may be in your spring break. That's what we're having here in Iowa City. So during those weeks where kids aren't in school is another thing to be on top of. I know any mom that's an HSP is going to know what that schedule is for their kids, and will be thinking ahead to either use that time to do something fun or catch up or spring cleaning, or it's time to get those play dates in place, or maybe there's a camp that you want to have your kid attend. But these are all really important things to be thinking about. And so I go into all of these specific dates. I have the rest guidelines. I have different book resources. So this is all on my checklist. I tell you how to use the checklist, the significance of all these different fixed dates and why they're important to think about. So if you're interested, please click the link on the top and you can grab that checklist. And then I have a bonus checklist that I'll just keep a mystery. And you can check that out if you get the freebie. But I would love to have anyone come up here and talk about what kind of systems you have in place to be mindful of all the things that you have to put in your calendar and how you keep your trait in mind when you're scheduling, so that you're not on running on empty from thing to thing, but you have space and time that is padding different events so that you feel that you can give your nervous system a break. So if there's anyone that would like to share your system, or if you have a particular way of going about your system so that you feel that you're getting that alone time, process sleep, I would love to hear from you. And it looks like Simona, am I saying that right? Welcome.
Yes, yes, you say right. Thank you. Yeah, myself, I are different years. I'm doing everything you said until right now. So I've been always particularly, can I say, attentive to see in particular with Mercury, because I found myself in really difficult situation. Also buying computer and telephone that didn't work, and it was exactly during that period. So now I check always when is Mercury retrograde, so that I can be sure that it's not the right time for me to buy electronic stuff. But what I found interesting for me, I would say in the last year, um, is that I realized that all these kind of things, from the moon to Mercury, or even stay, let's say, in rooms with people that are not particularly happy, I can prevent them and manage them if I work around my own energies, in the sense, if I found during the day a way to get joyful. that is slightly different from find my time to calm down, to rest, and to have some times for me. So I saw that above this, if I do also something on a regular basis, if I can every day, that makes me laugh, that makes me get real fun, those things do not affect me. Sometimes do not affect me at all, and sometimes on a very low level. At least this is my experience.
I love that you brought up Mercury retrograde because I feel like a lot of people don't understand
Mm.
how that can really impact, and like you said, not buying technology during that time is really important. And I always feel like Apple always releases things like right during that fall Mercury retrograde, and I'm always cautious and I wait till after that time, even like a week or two after. It's like Mercury retrograde, even though it has a specific date, even like 2 weeks before, I feel the energy of Mercury retrograde. So I try to just be really conscious of that because I remember I bought a beautiful, just like a very small size pocket digital camera. This was before smartphones. And I ended up losing that camera in a taxi cab. And I was so devastated. I didn't care so much about the camera, but just the images on the camera. But I just seem to recognize a pattern of when I ignore Mercury retrograde, I pay for it. So I'm glad that that is real for you too, because a lot of people think it's a lot of woo, but I've been following Mercury retrograde for probably 20 years, since I was aware of it. And I've just, as a very observational person, I've noticed anytime I've ignored it, I have had issues with whatever I purchased. So it's really important.
Yeah.
So, what do you use if you're interested in volunteering yourself? What do you use for a calendar system? Are you a digital person, a paper person? How do you think about your calendar and making sure that you get the rest and recharge time that you need as a highly sensitive person?
Um, Before, I was someone particularly organized in all these kind of things, and now instead I've learned to give up all and just try to follow how I feel. So even in this period, I don't know if it's for everyone, but for sure for me, I feel a lot of intense energies, and therefore I'm finding myself, in particular in this week, very tired. So I'm just allow myself, for example, to go to sleep early if I feel I need to sleep. So if it's already 7 o'clock in the evening and I feel like a zombie, I'm no longer trying to stay, let's say, alive, but I just go to sleep, and I can sleep also 10 hours or 12 hours. And when I wake up, I just see how I feel, and if the agenda that I have in front of me eventually need to be, let's say, managed in a different way. It's true also that the job that I do help me because anyway, I'm working as therapist allow me to make some changes. It's different than working for a company. But also there, as long time before I was working in company, I remember I could manage to do some tasks that maybe were lighter than others in those days where I was feeling, let's say, down, or at least with not enough energy. Those days where it's difficult even to get focus really on the different things. But right now, it's true that I try really to follow the flow, a little bit like a kind of surfist, like I'm on a wave during the day. And if I feel I have to stop for a moment and even rest, well, I try to do it like I'm a kind of mobile and I need to get in recharge for a few minutes to then keep going my day.
Yes, I always refer to the phone and charging ourselves or recharging. I use that a lot as well, as just a way to think about it, because we all have phones. We charge them maybe every night, or at least when it's low, we have to charge it. It's the same thing with ourselves. I think as HSPs, we also have to develop a certain level of self-compassion. And I hear what you're sharing as far as following your energetic flow and how important that is to you, and how you're honoring that different energy capacity. And you're noticing, do I have the energy for a um, less intense activity, or a more intense, or maybe I know that in the morning time, I have the ability to take on those bigger projects, but after dinner, I'm worthless. And so taking note of those times is unique for every HSP. Maybe some of us are night owls. We feel more productive in the evenings. Maybe some of us get up really early and we have a morning practice and we do different things to kind of set a foundation for our day before we go into work. And I think the other thing that you brought up that is really important, and I think we've gotten into this conversation in different career work conversations, but being a self-employed person versus having a 9 to 5 job, or a job that's even more taxing than that. So maybe you work more than 40 hours, and having to go to a physical office versus working from your home is all something, as HSPs, it's something to look at and see what is possible to make shifts for yourself. Because I've been self employed for the majority of my 30s and 40s. And I've just learned that even before I learned that I was an HSP, I'm a very creative person, really resourceful. I really go after different jobs and make I guess, a smorgasbord of jobs that create my income instead of just one job. And that has been really helpful for me to be in control of my schedule and to really honor those days that I might not have a full tank. And I can go about my day based on my energy instead of a time clock. So I'm curious to know if anyone has found self-employment to be more helpful for you as an HSP, or if you do have a conventional job, how do you go about taking care of your needs so that you can show up at that job and do your best? Um, and you said you're self-employed as well, right, Simona?
Yes, right now, yes. I mean, right now are already different years that I become psychotherapist, but before I was an executive in big companies of automotive industry for over 15 years. So I had the two experience, let's say like this.
So what was that experience in a large corporation for you? Did you know you were an HSP at the time, or how did you
At the
manage yourself?
time, no, I knew just that I was quite different from the others. But then at the same time, for me, it was not so evident that was from an HSP point of view, in the sense that I was one of the few women, and I was also a mechanical engineer. I mean, I still, I am a mechanical engineer, but I mean, I was among only men. So already there, I was feeling different. So it was not easy for me to realize that there was something more that was making me so different. So, for example, for me was super important passing my lunch time outside, very often in park, and it was something natural for me without knowing that actually it was an HSP. I was just feeling that for me was the moment I had to give up all the noise of the offices, all the questions, and just go outside and have my time, if it's possible, in the sun in a park. So I remember this really like they were my way of escaping.
Yes, exactly. And I think, we are intuitively pulled to these different approaches as HSPs, even if we don't know we're an HSP, because we just get that immediate feeling of relief,
Mm,
of like getting out of an office, being around a lot of energy or fluorescent lights or a lot of noise, and just getting that outdoor downtime and really giving yourself a break, because I'm sure a lot of us have had different times in our work experience where we sit at the desk and eat our lunch and eat it as fast as we can so we can get back to work. And I think that is a total disservice to ourselves, because I really think once we do take that break, we get that relief outside, we can connect again with the bigger picture. We can go back to work with a fuller tank than if we had just kind of plowed through our lunch. So I
mm,
think that's a really important thing to bring up.
yeah.
Um,
And I remember that another thing that I was doing in a kind of automatic way, and now I'm just laughing because I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm quite sure I was one of the few, maybe. I was regularly spending 1 or 2 minutes sit down in the toilet, sleeping. Because for me it was a huge problem, the lighting of the different offices. So I remember I was having really moments where it was like my brain was switched off, and my only way to survive it was to go to the toilet and close my eyes for few minutes and really sleeping, like the horses.
I
And
believe
just
you.
thinking,
I think moms do that too when they're at home with young kids and they just go to the bathroom and take a 5-minute break, right?
I think so.
Well, I also want to talk about, like I said in the title here, boundaries that we need to add to our calendar. And so when I use the word boundaries, I think it's a collection of data that we need to look at and understand our personal relationship with our limits. And when we can start to develop that self awareness and we really start to understand our natural tendencies, our patterns of just how our energy works, that really helps us then decide on what boundaries we need to put in place. So, the reason I created the checklist and I just rolled all of that out here at the beginning of our call is when we have those fixed items in our calendar, and then we are then going in to add our personal events or appointments or work schedule, we can really start to get a bird's eye view of how all these pieces come together. And when we see what we're taking on and we have a clear picture of all the things that we're putting in our calendar, that can help us get really clear about what we say yes to and how we need to say no to certain things, because they might be a last minute request and it doesn't really align with your schedule. And as HSPs, we tend to be people pleasers. It's hard for us to say no or to, let other people down. And so one of the things that I think is really important in setting our boundaries is to kind of have that calendar, that schedule in place, getting really clear about it. And then you have um, those pockets of time that you're not scheduled to kind of figure out what is appropriate for you to say yes and no to. And I think just having that clarity really helps you get better about prioritizing those empty slots of time. And then also recognizing that just because you have an empty slot doesn't mean you're available. That empty slot might be travel time, it might be transition time from going from one task to another. It might be your alone time. It might be your lunch break. So, really be thinking about those different parts of your schedule that aren't scheduled per se, but allow for those transitions, travel time, buffering time before and after something that's really intense, whether it's a presentation or a big project you're working on, or maybe you're taking the kids through a new routine and you're allowing for that energetic uh, what am I trying to say? That transition that can impose on your energy. And so not filling up your calendar, having those blank spots in your calendar, and then going back to Elaine Aron's rest guidelines, how important it is to start to look at your calendar as, where can I put a couple hours? Because that's her recommendation, 2 hours a day to process, be alone, being quiet, and allow for you to just connect to that energy flow that's running through you. And you might get a nudge, you might have an idea come to you, or you might remember something that you needed to put on your to-do list. So it can be productive. It doesn't have to be sitting and doing nothing. But I think giving yourself that opportunity to tune in to that inner guidance system is really key as a highly sensitive person. And ultimately, I feel that when we allow for more time to do that, a lot of the things that we are externally trying to control will naturally work themselves out in more of a flow state than if we were to sit there and plot everything out, every single detail. So just making sure you have a mix and a balance of things that are fixed and then things that are open. And then if someone comes to you with a request, being realistic about your energy load and limits, and saying yes to things that align with that, and also your priorities. So that is something that's really important for highly sensitive people, and something that maybe isn't easy for people to think about. It's something that I have been doing for decades, so it feels very natural to me. But when I talk to other people, I realize that they're maybe not putting as much time in planning and thinking through the different things that they're saying yes to, or how many things they're putting on their calendar, and really just omitting the self-care that it takes to be a highly sensitive person. So I would love to hear from anyone that has struggles with this, or hasn't thought about their calendar this way, or if this resonates with you in terms of creating boundaries so that you're taking care of that precious time and energy as a highly sensitive person. And if you have any thoughts that you wanted to add, Simona, I'll go ahead and mute myself.
I think what you said about self-care is absolutely super important, and I think it makes a difference for the HSP, in the sense that for the HSP that made already work on themselves or not. And I mean with this the fact that very often HSP are so used to, sorry, I'm in the street. They are so used to take care of the others first, that very often for them taking care of themselves could be something that remain, let's say, in the agenda, but in a corner, until the day that they start to work on themselves and realize how much is important taking care of themselves first.
I totally agree. And I mean, I revolve so much of what I do around self-care. Um, it just feels second nature to me now. I don't think of self-care as something that I have to compartmentalize and put on my calendar. It's something that's just part of my energetic flow, but it has taken me a long time. And like I said, I've been self-employed most of my work career, and naturally had to think about so many different things when I plot out my schedule. So Self-care is something that I've been intentional about, but also as I learned that I was an HSP, I've put in even more requirements that help take care of my nervous system so that I'm kind of keeping my energy balanced versus having an intense time and then going off the deep end and having to spend a couple days to recover. So my whole preventative approach is to kind of keep it in a zone that doesn't yank me too high or too low in that energetic flow. So that's a very important point. And I see we have Marwa and Liza up here. I would love to pass the mic off to Marwa. What would you like to share?
Hello?
Hello, how are
Hello?
you?
Hello. I'm fine. Thanks so much. I really like this discussion, and maybe I want to comment about Simone and what she was saying. It's very interesting because I'm the same situation, and it's absolutely been for me since I start working in university or this offices, and you have to be social all the time. And to be honest, I have also been in the bathroom sometimes, just lying. I feel pain. I just I thought I was the only person doing that, but yeah, I was also doing that as well. Uh, and it's to get a point affecting my life because one of things, for example, at the work, they have a WhatsApp group, and you have to report each time, each minute what you're doing. And what I did is just mute it all the time, and it made me a problem because my colleague is very extroverted, and my boss also is extroverted person, and it's painful. It's so painful, and now I can't be self-employed, fully self-employed, but I feel I want this freedom, and sometimes it's too painful at work exactly to be social, and you have to be there all the time. I thought, to be honest, to hate my life. I feel like I'm not a normal person, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what's the solution. If I go to isolate myself, and sometimes I do things, people connect and know things I don't know about that, because it's kind of a trade-off between my freedom and be this kind of safe place to avoid noise and light. All these things, it's just painful, and I admit I don't know how to do it. I'm 31 now, 31 years old, and I feel failure, to be honest, because of this. I have to admit that I have a good moments, but overall I think in this life and the work, it's just I don't know what I should do. And I think Simona was saying something very interesting, but I don't know how to cope with that, but to be honest, it's too painful for me. And I totally, yeah, agree with everything said so far, but it's too painful. Yeah.
And when you share it's too painful, are you referring to just having a 9 to 5 job or a job that's putting a lot of requirements on you? Is that what you're referring to?
Actually, yes, I'm more college person, so I've been in academia working more than 9 to 5. It's just more than that. And yeah, I think that's one of the things I want to be less stressful. But again, it's about like you have every minute to report what you're doing in WhatsApp group. And I literally hate looking at the apps or even social media. I started to not look to the feed, and I feel that's also had a downside in my life because everyone's connecting and know what everyone's doing, and I just like abstaining that I don't want to know everything. I just want peace of mind. But it seems that I'm losing this connection with people because you have to be active, you have to report, you have to be funny, you have to do everything every minutes in the office, and I don't know what I should do. It seems a struggle to me, to be honest, to change who I am, and it seems not desirable to be quiet or hating lights or hating sound. That's actually what I feel painful for me. I feel happy when I have this to do what I'm really like doing, like podcasting. This is a side hustle for me. I feel creative. I feel free. I feel myself. Yeah, that's what I mean by painful.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I mean, having to check in and report everything that you're doing feels very boxed in and doesn't give you a lot of freedom. It's kind of like having that on switch. I think about days where I have to be on, meaning a day I have to get on Clubhouse or a day I need to show up and do a sub job and the energy it takes to do that. And if I'm not breaking that up and balancing that time with appropriate sleep or meditation or alone time, processing time, outdoor time, it will definitely throw my system off. And it just feels like one constant struggle. And one of the things that I always preach and say HSPs really need to start with, if you're not taking that time to get the right amount of sleep, the right quality of sleep, and those precious few hours where you can be alone and quiet and just give yourself a minute to process your day and be alone with your thoughts, that is the top priority I would create in your system, in your calendar system. And I'm not sure how flexible your work schedule is, or if there's allowances to make those changes. But if there isn't, ultimately, and again, maybe this is a job that you're doing short term, this isn't forever. That is something I would look at changing if at all possible, because as HSPs, we really have to get grounded with our self care, or we will go into burnout, and that may create a lot of health issues, anxiety, depression. And so taking care of our health as HSPs is really important. And that involves how we set up our schedule and the work that we do. So I'm just wondering if there's any flexibility for you to prioritize just these basic levels of self-care for an HSP.
I will be short, Julia, for anyone to participate. I actually, because of the stress, I had last month my first panic attack, and I have been hospitalized because of that, and I felt like losing my life. It was horrible, and I admit that being in academia, the stress is very painful for me, and I'm trying to find alternative to escape the situation of this, the constant, as they say, to be in the office. But I'm just telling you that yes, too much is. I was about to lose my life because of the constant stress. And I think the best way is to choose to be happy, and to be happy is to, yeah, I can't compromise who I am being as HSP person. I know it's not desirable. It seems so, but it's tough to be honest, especially in extroverted situation in offices or yeah. But I don't know if there's a solution other than choose something different, and that's what I'm planning to do.
Well, that's a good start. And I think just being self aware and noticing your limits and taking care of your health, especially after 2 years of this pandemic, I think we really need to shift how we connect with ourselves and our values and our priorities. And instead of working against your biology, really working with it so that you can care for yourself and prevent burnout and panic attacks and health issues. So it sounds like you're moving in the right direction. I do remember you being in a room talking about your podcast and how much joy that brings you. And I think that's also really important to be balancing maybe a difficult work schedule with something that brings you a lot of joy. So that's really important, and I'm glad that you're doing that. I would love to pass the mic off to Liza. Thanks for being here, Liza. I'm sure you have some information here that you would like to share.
Yes, thank you so much, Julie, for holding this space. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Marwa was saying. It is a hard life to be a highly sensitive person. Like, no lie. I also have two highly sensitive kids, and like it's made me sad over the years to see, like, how hard it is for children and teenagers to be an HSP too. And so, I've just been trying to help them understand too, like, that we do need downtime, quiet time. And sometimes you do have to, like, invert the plan. So my kids are older now, and next year we're moving to homeschooling because it's been really hard. I mean, for my kids, HSPs, one of them's also an empath, to be around 2,000 other kids, that all angst, and all the kids are going through something. 7 hours a day, it becomes too much, and so we're excited to do this next year, and I kind of wish I would have even done it sooner. So, like, sometimes, it sounds like so drastic, but it makes perfect sense. And I work from home, my husband works from home, and we just kind of do our own thing. I think a lot of HSPs, have had to adapt lifestyles to make things work for them. But one of the things I wanted to share in terms of self-care and boundaries, it is a practice, knowing your boundary. I even have to be reminded. I just had a really intense IEP meeting for my high schooler yesterday, and I had other things on my calendar, and that IEP meeting took so much of my energy that I just, like, today I'm so tired, and now I know why. I'm like, oh, it was that IEP meeting. So I even get challenged in practicing this. But the way I handle my calendar is, at the time when something feels right, I'll throw it on the calendar, but I cancel things left and right and move things around, and I don't care. And that had to come from working on self-worth. I think self-worth is at the root of so much of our challenges, and leaning into self-care, holding boundaries, saying no, putting yourself on top of the list. It's all about this practice of self-worth and understanding that your worth is not tied to how much money you make. I have to teach this to my teenage daughter. Your worth is not tied to the grade you get on a science test. None of these things, you know, tell you your worth. I mean, that's something that you have to go within and get aligned and go on your own spiritual journey. That's what I've had to do. But once I really understood and lived with, you know, this highest level of worth that I have for myself, that's when holding boundaries, doing self-care, declining invitations, not feeling guilt, those things become so much easier. So those are some of the things I just wanted to pass on.
I love that you bring up this idea of self-worth. And I mean, it's really difficult as an HSP when you're feeling everyone around you and your environment, and you're pulling everything in, and it's that information overload where it's easy for you to see how to make other people more comfortable, but you tend to put yourself on the last part of that list. And I think as I've gotten older, I think it's easier when we're older to be really mindful of our self-worth and how we give our time away, and um, not having so much of that FOMO, or having that angst about letting someone down. Ultimately, I think we're stronger in our worth when we put those boundaries in place, because we are honoring those inner nudges. I mean, you can always tell when you say yes to something if it's not aligned with your energy or your values or your priority, because you'll just get this sinking feeling of, why did I say yes to that? Or I don't know if I can do that. And also being really adjustable with your schedule. I think you mentioned that as well. And I have always been someone that is comfortable with that. If I need to rearrange something, if I put something in my calendar and it just doesn't feel based on the level of sleep I had the night before, or maybe I had something pop up in the morning that took a lot of my energy, so I don't have the space and bandwidth to do that afternoon event. Just really being mindful of those puzzle pieces and changing things as you need to, and really not apologizing for it. Just like you, Liza, I definitely don't have any apologies of canceling an event or shifting an appointment. especially when I go in for doctor's appointments, which I did a lot of in 2021. I have to really psych myself up to do those particular appointments. And if I'm not in the right headspace, I'll just rearrange it because I really need a lot of my strength and courage to deal with doctors that don't necessarily listen to you. So I just love those examples that you brought up. Those are really important. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic off to Christopher. Thanks for being here, Christopher. What would you like to share?
Hi guys. Hi Julie. I haven't seen you in a minute, but good to see you again. Yeah, I have a couple of stories that I feel like is on could be potentially beneficial. First one is the Dalai Lama was talking to his lead monk, and then he asked him, like, what do you seek? And he's like, I seek wisdom. And they were having tea at the moment, and he just overpoured it, and it's like, well, what are you doing? It's like, well, first of all, you need to empty your cup before you could seek what you're seeking for. And it was, that's one aspect of it. And the other one is that the Dalai Lama also was going to take a nap, and one of the other monks was like, "Well, how are you taking a nap when there's so much need in the world?" It's like, I can't help anyone else until I help myself first, right? So, and that's in fact to self care, right? So, how we can't help others until we first fill our own cup. I view it as a cup, right? So when we have a cup of abundance, we can give unto others, but it's not selfish and to yield back, because there's those that will want to take, and especially being highly sensitive people that that they want to attach to us, and we have to be careful with that, because that is can be problematic, I'm gonna say. And but if we view it like a dance or a flow or a wave, that how we can navigate it, then we can, um, yeah, we can get the intention that we want to on the waves to, or the alignment or the synchronicity to coalesce. But we have energy. We all have energy, and we're we're navigating. We're going down this path, right? But we have to recognize when that's not too much, because I, okay, I'll be a little bit vulnerable. I went too much down that road, and it led me to a crisis, because I wanted to help every single person. I didn't care. Didn't work out very well for me. I led it to not a really good place, headspace. I can lend that there. But what I can say coming out of that is that it's an ebb and a flow. It's a dance. You know, it's part self care and part what I'm pouring into. But we can't pour into an empty cup.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those two stories. They totally resonated with me. And I've talked about this before. You know, if you think about being on a plane, they always say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help others. And I think that's a mantra that we really need to take on as highly sensitive people. And I can tell you from experience, I definitely have had people take advantage of my sensitivity in terms of requests. And this was probably more so when I didn't know I was a highly sensitive person. And I just had empathy for everything and everyone. And so if someone was in a crisis, I would jump. If someone needed me to take care of their kid, their dog, I would just say yes. And I didn't really put my needs into that mix. And it has been very harmful. And you also start to train those people, especially if they're family or close friends, that once you have that boundary that's very loose, they learn to relate to you that way with that loose boundary. So if you've done it once, they might request that you do it again. And so just knowing and having that self-awareness is really important. And it's never too late to have a boundary put in place, or to let someone know that you need to think about that request or sleep on it or get back to them later in the week when you have a better sense of your schedule. So if there's ever an uncomfortable feeling where you feel like you have to let someone down, you can always pause in that moment and really take that time to process what that would look like for your energy and your schedule, and then get back to that person. I think is something that HSPs really need to learn as well. Because if you take that time to think about it, you might say, well, obviously that's not going to work. But in the moment, it's kind of confronting to have to let someone down. So that's just another approach that has been really helpful for me. And I would love to pass the mic off to, I'm going to try and say it, Jael. Am I saying it right?
Yes, hello, Julie. Hello, everyone. My name is Jael Ortega, and I wanted to participate today because this conversation is wonderful, and is this particular topic of boundaries is one that I have struggled with my whole life, and it was only until probably about 6 or 7 months ago that I had to do something, because just like so many of us, right, we feel for other people, and being a HSP, I just, I wanted to help people, right? I was like, I found my purpose when I was helping other people. And as Liza was saying, and also you, Julie, and this is something that I also work on in my practice, right? What are your values? What are you saying yes to? Whenever you run and try to help other people, what are you saying yes to? And as a consequence, what are you saying no to? Right? So that has become for me a very useful tool when deciding what is that I want to do as an energy healer, as a coach, like, do I want to come every day on Clubhouse, like really seeing myself, as a lover of life, as a provider, and coming to terms with that, because I was not very happy with my life for decades, right? And it was a challenge. It was a difficult challenge that I don't think I understood how sensitive I was, and what I could do about it. But the reason why I wanted to participate here right now is to give you 3 tools, if you can use it. Right. So the first one would be this: when we as women, especially as women, right, we have our periods. So if you're still having your period, right, just look for the days and the times within a calendar month, right, when you are the most irritable, the most happy, the most tired? Is it during, before, after your period? And then look at the full moon. So today is a full moon, right? So look at the full moon. What is that doing to you? Because perhaps, like all of us, right, you have a calendar and you have set up a meeting at the doctor's or with your team, your job, whatever that is, and then you are crushing, you're pushing your body, right? And to the limit. And you don't even know it. You just feel stressed, you just feel anxious and tired. And perhaps you're also eating as a consequence. So that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. And it's the food that we eat, right? That fuels our anxiety, fuels the values that we're choosing on autopilot, values of survival, because one thing is to take care of my energy and another is to be super anxious and protect myself all the time, which makes me an energy vampire, right? An attacker, attacking all the time because I'm just, trying to protect myself constantly. So what I wanted to share from my heart is, please look at your calendar. If you're a woman, look at which days during the month are you the most sensitive, right? And then if you can, try to see the patterns within that time. And also look at the values that you are using to choose when you are helping others, right? So if you're choosing values, like for example, if you want to help your family or your friends because you don't want to disappoint them, then then there's, perhaps you need some support, perhaps you need some help, perhaps you need to talk to someone to help you understand that self-worth is not something that comes naturally as empaths or highly sensitive people, right? So and also look at the food that you're choosing as a consequence of the mindset that you have and what that food is triggering within you. So I just wanted to share this because I found it to transform my life the most. For example, just to give you a quick example, and then I'll be finished. I would love to have pizza and chocolate right before and during my period. And if there was a full moon, then I will have both. And then the next days after, I will be super anxious and like it won't be fun to be around me, right? So I just wanted to share that, to tell you that one is not your fault, but there are things that you can do to make your life easier, so it is not a struggle that every time you wake up you're like facing and coping, instead of curious and perhaps in love with life and thriving. Okay, so thank you so much for this room, and my name is Jael Ortega, and I'm done.
Thank you so much. I love the way you articulated that. And that is something that is at the very top of my list. I feel like we should have an HSP women's clubhouse where we talk about our periods, because there's so many layers there. And you brought up so many great examples. I was just talking to an HSP friend, and one of the patterns that I have with my period is right before and maybe at the beginning of my period, I will start to catastrophize. I will be in a downward spiral. I will think of one negative thing, which will lead to another negative thing. And all of a sudden, everything is in crisis mode and the world is turned upside down. And I just feel completely incapable. And if I note where that energy and that thought process is in my period, it's pretty consistent. And so this is another reason why I highly recommend a period tracker if you're still menstruating, and to also make notes in your tracker, those different thought processes that you have, or those moods or energy slumps that you might have. And I do reference a couple of those resources in the link above. And I cannot say enough about the book called The Woman Code by Alyssa Vita, I think is her last name. And again, I have that book in the link above. But in the book, she talks specifically about the different foods that each phase of your period require to kind of sync up those different stages of your period where your estrogen is maybe higher or your progesterone is more higher or lower. And then there's foods that can help kind of bring those ups and downs into more of a balanced state. And so that's something to think about, along with, you know, those cravings that you have around the premenstrual time, and then how that energy affects you. Like you mentioned, if I'm overdoing it with pizza and chocolate, I might feel anxious in the days afterwards. So those are really important things to track as a woman, especially as a highly sensitive woman, because we're already in a world that doesn't necessarily allow us to slow down, especially when we're on our period or even ovulating. Those are different times where we might feel more fatigued. And when we note those in our calendar, we have the ability to perhaps take a day off or not make it a heavy schedule day. Of course, periods can be unpredictable, but if you're tracking it, you will start to see what your pattern is, and it will help you better prepare in your calendar. So I love that you brought these up. This is something that I have been doing for years, and I didn't look at it this way as a highly sensitive person until 2018, but I've really just got grounded with the different energy cycles that come up through the different phases of our menstrual cycle. So thank you so much for bringing that up. You had such a great ad there, because um, I think as women, it's not something we give a lot of time and attention to, and we can tend to be at odds with our period or dislike that time. And it's kind of embracing and having a lot of self-compassion, because we are in more of a circular flow versus a linear flow. And that circular flow is really dependent on the moon cycle and when we menstruate and ovulate. So those are really important things to note. Um, and we'll go here for just a little bit longer here, another 12 minutes. I would love to pass the mic off to Candace. Thanks for being here, Candace. What would you like to share?
Hello, guys. Hello, Julie. This is my first time here, and so I thought that this is like an open room, and we can just raise our hand and come up. But I haven't prepared anything, but I was already following this room for 2 weeks. But yeah, basically, um I'm a highly sensitive em- empath, and um I yeah, sorry, I haven't prepared much, but I would just like to stay here and see if I can contribute anything later.
No problem. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I just see Jennifer had written something in the chat, and I can share here. I'll bring you up. Whoops. Jennifer, I just saw your chat and I was going to read it, but maybe you want to share what you wrote in the chat?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Hi, Julie. I know I'm coming in at the end of the room, so forgive me if this has already been pointed out, but I love that book. It really blew my mind. Um, Kind of like the HSP or anything that teaches something about myself, it's just so precious to me. And I feel like, oh, I'm seen, or that makes sense, that kind of thing. So in the book, and I read it a long time ago, so I'm actually going to go dig through my photos to see if I could redo a screenshot of it. But that list was so great. And if I remember right, she recommended, if it seems overwhelming to do, which yes, for me that was, because I've got kids and this and that, I'm going to cook what I have to cook. But she recommended starting with the vegetables, I think, because it provides those micronutrients that really help with whatever phase you're trying to support. And the other thing, and I'm not sure if it was her book or another like similar book, but learning about the circadian rhythm blew my mind, which is a daily cycle. And you could also plan your day around your circadian rhythm and knowing, and or just observing your daily energies. But it's not trickier, but it's more complicated with women because we have two overlapping cycles. We have that daily circadian rhythm, and then we also have that, nearly like monthly moon rhythm. And so yeah, I'm not a fan of tracking, but having an app that's super easy to use, and especially since I'm tracking for my period anyway, because I do that because every time I go to the doctor and they ask me when was the last time, blah blah blah, I don't remember, so I have to have it in the app. But yeah, it's interesting. And then I read these. I'm 41, and I read these, I don't know, over the last few years, and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew this earlier, and it's almost like a source of power, because it's like, now the more you know, right? Like the more you know, then you could use that to your advantage. So and again, I'm sorry if you guys already talked upon this, but like, like maybe when you're on your period, you allow yourself to retreat. You plan that retreating in your calendar, and maybe you do some right and left brain thinking where you're able to, like, use those energies there. And then for me, the big one was the phase right before you get your period. It is really great for organizing, like deep, like I'm going to clean out the pantry, I'm going to clean out the kids' toy closet, I'm going to, and I like, maybe some other things might get dropped off the to-do list, but I'm focusing in, and I'm going deep, and it feels good, and I have the energy to do it. Where if I had, just because the kids' stuff closet needs to get redone, I'm not going to schedule that when I'm on my period, or the part after my period, because my energy might not be there. So I felt very empowered by it. And what else did I want to say? I guess that's it. So thanks. I love this subject, wholeness.
I love it. I love that you brought up the organizing part, because I can always tell when I get really OCD almost about my environment, and I'm like, oh, my period's coming. I know that phase of my cycle. And I know you said you didn't track, but it sounds like you're familiar with the different phases. And that's what I like about the app. So when you are tracking, and then it'll give you kind of a notification that'll say you're in the ovulation phase. And this is things that you can do to align with that energy, whether you're journaling or the different foods that you're putting in your body, and the different energy that kind of comes with that stage of your period. I think it's just fascinating. And like you said, it's very empowering to know that about yourself, instead of working against yourself or working against your trait. It's just the more you know about your body and how um, we're biologically set up and also hormonally set up, you're not going to bombard your system with a lot of tasks when you're on your period, because for a lot of us, we might need extra sleep, or we might have symptoms that keep us, on the couch or in bed. And that's just not kind to yourself to schedule things that would impose on that stage of your cycle. So I love that you brought up just the organizational component and just honoring yourself. And the more you know, the more you're empowered to align yourself with those priority systems. I mean, I think it's, as women, we really have to talk about our periods more, and we have to normalize what that experience is like, because the male population doesn't have a clue about it. Even if a male lives with a female, they don't have that awareness around our cycle and how circular that is for us, versus masculine energy is very linear. And so just having that little bit of information allows you to think about 30-day cycles instead of this is what my day looks like, this is what my week looks like, and everything is fixed and systematic. And that just doesn't work for a female mode of operation, in my opinion. So
I love that. And you just said something that made me remind what the other thing I wanted to say was when I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the term. What's when you're most fertile? When you're ovulating, right?
yes.
Yeah. When I'm ovulating, it said that that's a great time to be social, right? Because you're just shining and you got, whatever hormones support that social thing. And for me, I would have a great day, let's say like talking to somebody, right? And then the next week or something, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to put it on my schedule. I'm going to call this friend. I'm going to do this, da da da. And I would kind of fall a little flat. And I would, in my head, like afterwards, kind of beat myself up over it. I don't do this now, but maybe like, you know, this year has been a lot of growth for me, but I used to do that a lot. And then when it said, oh, well, this is a really good time for socializing, I was like, oh, that's why, because I'm set up to socialize here. And so it, even if I do socialize and it's not in that, I'm not synced up with my thing, at least I can give myself some grace and be like, well, there's a reason why. It's not because you've set up a goal and you're failing at it. It's just that it's a little tougher, and that's okay. So it also just helped ease my inner critic, and that's big for me because my inner critic talks a lot. So thank you, Julie, so much for this room, wholeness.
I hear you. And I think that I was very much ruled by that inner critic, like I would just treat myself so poorly because I was in that masculine energy of produce, go, go, go. And then when I learned a lot more about my flow and the different phases and just what is actually chemically and hormonally happening in the body, I think you can learn to be a lot more kinder to yourself. So developing that self-compassion, I just think that is huge for our cycles. I love that you brought that up. I just want to quickly mention Fabienne's message. She has asked, um, does the Woman's Code book talk about premenopause or menopause? I need to revisit that and look at that. That's something that I've had conversations with people who are no longer menstruating. But what I've learned is even when we're not menstruating, we still are connected to the moon cycle. So even though we're not bleeding every month, we are still connected to that flow and that 30-day cycle of the new moon, full moon, and all those different phases. So even if you're not menstruating, there is still opportunity for you to connect with that natural cycle. I think it's just when we're menstruating, we have that extra tier that we're layering with that full moon, new moon cycle. So this just makes me want to have a period talk for HSPs. So this is such a rich, deep topic. So I just want to go ahead and offer the mic to, is it Fatih? Am I saying it correctly? And then we'll go ahead and close down the room here shortly. So go ahead and let us know what you would like to share.
Hi, Julie. This is Fatih. Thank you. Um, the topic was boundaries, and I know from my personal experience that the boundaries were pushed or even destroyed by the way we have been raised. So it could be fatherly figure, motherly figure. Religion plays a role, tradition, culture, where we grew up, all these things, and if it affects a highly sensitive person especially, and when we lose these boundaries, it's like we lose ourselves. We can't identify now, are these my emotions or someone else's? So we are conflicted, and it causes this wishy-washy thoughts, identification crisis. So the best option for me personally was to move away, and that was in my early 20s. from Germany to Vancouver, BC, Canada, and start my healing journey. But despite that, it's like when these emotions are within me, that has been passed down genetically through the genetic memory, because it didn't start it with me or with my parents. This is something generational, which my work based on ancestral lineage clearing and ancestral lineage analysis, also medical intuition. I realized most of the highly sensitive people have abandonment issues because we don't know who we are. We didn't know who we are as a child because of these influences from mother, father, grandparents, later on elementary school, high school, wherever that is. So that's why now I'm not sure if the scapegoat is also the highly sensitive person. Julie, can you give me just your viewpoint? Is the scapegoat also the a highly sensitive person?
Do you mean are highly sensitive people used as the scapegoat, or how
Yes.
do you mean?
Yes.
I mean, I've never explored scapegoat. I mean, I know highly sensitive people are picking up information and everything that you mentioned as far as generational and um, being more of that energy that is absorbing other people's energy. It's hard to differentiate between our own and others. But I'm not
Right.
specifically, yeah, as far as the scapegoat goes, I would maybe give me an example of what you mean by that.
Um, Scapegoat is one who breaks out of the family tradition, of the family culture, even religion, and takes on a journey like the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell. To do the clearing work for the for herself or himself and for the ancestral lineage. And I assume now, after we talked, I guess the scapegoat is also designed, has this highly sensitive nervous system to feel everything in depth, to search for the truth. But I also realized when highly sensitive people don't know who they are because of influence from all over the place, uh, um, earlier or later we're going to face the fear of abandonment because we got so used to other people's information, and that leaves a gap open to our boundaries, and we can't be in a hermit mode constantly. We need to step out and face these challenges, and that's the evolution of the highly sensitive person, to understand and become aware, that who they truly are. And when it's so far that they get it, and I look back, or you look back, damn, it's like we had all this education. We learned so much about healing. Now we can provide it to other people. It's like the trauma becomes a blessing in the end. That's what I'm realizing. And that's what I had to say. Thank you so much.
Yes, I understand what you mean about the scapegoat now. Well, I'm the oldest child of three, and I have always considered myself the black sheep of the family because I resist a lot of the passed down patterns that have kind of kept things conditioned to be the same versus breaking out and having different ideals and values and priorities around those systems that do not serve those who have that depth and self awareness. So I can totally see highly sensitive people being the pattern disruptors in that lineage and breaking those cycles. I see that happening a lot. I never really equated it to being a highly sensitive person, but now that you brought that up, that really does resonate with me in terms of maybe that is our path and our purpose by being finely tuned and having that sponge like experience of everything around us, that when we're noticing those patterns and observing and putting those data points together, obviously the more that you know, the more that you want to set yourself up for what makes you feel comfortable and what makes sense for you, and how your life reflects those values and priorities. So that makes total sense to me, but I don't know if there's any research, or I don't know a lot if there's information that has been discussed around that, but I think that's a very valid point. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And I can definitely relate to being on the healing journey as an HSP. And I think that's another thing that we can offer to one another, is just being on that path and understanding ourselves, and then passing those tools and practices and resources that have been helpful, because that is definitely what drives me to serve and support other HSPs, is having a difficult time in my later years of just not properly managing my nervous system and not having that awareness that I was a highly sensitive person. So not knowing and giving myself that compassion and those boundaries that really honor who I am, and putting those needs in place in my schedule, in space and time. And now that I have dealt with a lot of chronic health issues after I turned age 40, those things are now forced into my life. I have to set myself up. Otherwise, I'm just not really functional, and I'm not really good to myself or to anyone else in my life. So those are really important things to think about as well. So I just wanted to say cheers to your healing journey. And let's just see here really quickly. Okay. I was just making sure there weren't any direct questions in the chat, but there is some great information in there. And this will be available in a replay, so you'll be able to look at what is it left in the chat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close this room unless there's any questions or comments that anyone would like to share. I really appreciate everyone being open to this conversation, and for showing up and just letting us know what is working for you and what has helped shape your boundaries in your schedule, and how we can be better about that as a highly sensitive person, and those factors that can really influence our decision making, whether it's your menstrual cycle or your work schedule or your family life. I think lifestyle is something we have to be really creative and resourceful about, and recognize that it's going to look different than 80% of the population, and that's okay. And that's part of that self-acceptance that we need to create for ourselves, because in the long run, we will be our better selves. We will have more to offer and contribute in the world if we're taking care of our biology. So, again, if you haven't followed the club, just click on the little green house on the top and you will be alerted when we have different rooms. I am going to continue to schedule rooms at this time, Thursdays at 11 o'clock Central. And I will be getting that calendar up here shortly. Um, and I really appreciate everyone who has been popping in these rooms, whether it's just to listen or come up on stage and share, or even be someone that regularly checks the replays. I've really just enjoyed being a part of this community and connecting with you all. So thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you next week.